This is Fintech Chatter, presented by Tier 1 People, leaders in Fintech executive search. And I'm your host, Dexter Cousins. Today's guest is Kristofer Rogers, General Manager for Australia and New Zealand at Mambu. Mambu is the cloud-native digital banking platform, and Kris is instrumental in solidifying Mambu's presence in this region. In November 2019, Kris was named CEO Magazine's Startup Executive of the Year for his work as the CEO of Split Payments. Kris was the driving force behind Split's success and transformation into a key player in direct debit and real-time payment solutions. Kris is recognized as an innovator in the tech industry and a thought leader in emerging payments and specifically open banking. Kris, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dexter. Pleasure to be here.
Mate, it's great to have you on. We've talked about doing this, I think, all the way back when you were at Split Payments. So maybe it's for about 18 months. I've been threatening to get you on. You had a cameo at the at Intersect, but now we got the full live Kris Rogers.
No, it's the full flavor behavior. I've been following the progress of your podcasts. You've been my companion on many a road trip, and your guests are admirable. So very humbled to be on here, and looking forward to a conversation.
Well, Kris, it is great to have you on. You and I think, had a chat probably around about August, September last year as you left Split. And you gave me some really exciting news, and I was genuinely thrilled for you when you shared with me that you were taking on the Mambu General Manager role here in Australia. And look, I just wondered if you could share with our listeners who aren't aware of Mambu a bit about what the business is and what you do.
Absolutely. If you follow principles like Rockefeller, this big, hairy, audacious goal, Mambu has one. They're looking to change the core banking world. And that's an area which is timely for change, but is so hard to break into. These big banks have age-old legacy technology running the systems. And so what Mambu is, for the listeners, let me start again, is essentially a cloud-based SaaS-modeled core banking platform. So SaaS and cloud native is easy to understand in several other verticals, but in core banking. So when I left Split, to be honest, Dexter, I was ready to do some consulting, continue my payments evangelism. I'm a big fan of open banking, but being approached by this behemoth global company going through hyperscale, looking to try and replace core banking, for me was generational and a huge challenge. So I couldn't say no. I was romanced by this idea of bringing modern technology into one of the bastions of the world, which is banking.
Yeah. Now, I guess here in Oz, it's a pretty tough market to penetrate. There's a lot of, as you mentioned, legacy issues. How has Mambu gone about tackling, what is a really tough market here down under? It's very competitive as well.
Look, it really is. And there's two sides to this coin. One is technology, but the other side is cultural. How do you get these large organizations, these large financial services providers thinking differently about how they build out their technology stack? And that's very much cultural. It's very much showing them that change is good and they need to adapt to, modern day market conditions and consumer expectations. It's not easy. Our global wins and Australian wins to date have tended to be your sort of emerging financial providers, like your neobanks, your lenders, your non-bank lenders. But we're coming of age now where we're working with the largest banks across the globe. And it shows, like I said, that timing is everything. I often look at the adage, no one gets fired for choosing IBM, right? People feel safe in their core because it works. It's not broken, but it's also not fit for purpose anymore. So de-risking that. So my job, Dexter, to be honest, is not selling the tech. The people far smarter than me to do that within Mambu. But it's showing your C-suite and your leaders that you can make these decisions. You can be bold with your technology to stay relevant when so many non-banks are now sort of getting big wins in terms of market share.
Now it's a bit of a, as you mentioned, a kind of, fairy tale story, Mambu. Do you want to share with our
Mm.
listeners a bit about the kind of where the business is at now, and how many people you are, whereabouts you are in the world, what funding stage you're at? Because it's pretty significant business.
It is now. It is now. And like I said, hyper growth is an incredibly nervous and exciting space to be in. The origin story is actually a social impact story. So the four founders, and Eugene Danilkis is still our global CEO and a co-founder. It was born out of doing microfinance work in regions like Africa. So they were doing this project after university and discovered there was a real gap in the underlying technology that drives things like microfinance. So the vision of Mambu is to help power the unbanked, the banked, and deliver a better service, and that remains at the core of our genetic and culture today. But as we built out a core banking system, we realized the leverageability of new technology. So we become a very sophisticated platform, especially where we are today. So slow growth. We're not new. We're celebrating our 10th birthday this year, and we've grown in size significantly. Dexter, we've been fortunate to have 100% year-on-year growth for the last 4 years. That culminated over Christmas 2020 with a significant raise of 110 million euro. And that gave us a valuation in excess of 2 billion if we're talking Aussie dollars. So double unicorn status. And, whilst that in itself is impressive, it's what we're doing with it that really excites me. So let's go back to Australia, where our listeners are. When I came on board, we were a team of 8. We've since more than doubled that. We're really doubling down on the markets that are important to Mambu, and Australia and New Zealand. You rightly said it's a challenge, but it's also timing and the right time for us to win market share, double down, commit, providing country support, and show this market how serious Mambu are.
Yeah. Now, you talked about kind of some of the clients you did have. You've had some, you've got some significant wins. Tyro, so they're not insignificant businesses here. What would you say has been the kind of secret to, getting those wins with fintechs and some of their kind of startup businesses, and why have they chosen you guys? Because there are a lot of options out there.
There are, and I'll come back to the cultural alignment in a moment. But if you think tech first, so this is all about fintech. If you look at the market around core banking, the legacy vendors tend to be end to end, and by that I mean every part of the banking requirement is provided by that vendor. So you have your payments, your ledger, your product engine, your pricing, etc. Whilst that sounds convenient, it doesn't reflect where we are as a market today. Today is the era of fintechs. We have fintechs owning origination, fintechs owning regtech, fintechs owning payments. Where Mambu sits is democratizing the core banking world so that you can choose a fintech ecosystem, not an end to end vendor. So it gives you freedom, adaptability, speed to market, the ability to innovate. And that's radically different to yesteryear when you're looking specifically at core banking. Tyro, great cultural fit. As you know, probably Dexter, they build everything. A lot of their tech is proprietary and they've built an incredible tech stable. We were the first sort of third party they ingested into their tech stack. And they did that so readily and with ease because of the alignment, the configurability. So it's a real hero case. For me, it's also a time when Mambu were put on the map in terms of APRA, regulatory audits, compliance with the prudential standards. That was Mambu coming of age in this market. So significant win.
Fantastic. Now, we're starting to see the Australia's big four banks start to, I guess, kind of embrace this ecosystem approach that you've mentioned. We've got Westpac with the 10x platform. We've got CBA with X15, where they're building out infrastructure to help fintechs plug into their network. What do you think are the advantages of going with an external provider like a Mambu rather than trying to build something in house?
Yeah, that's the build or buy question that that everyone looks at, and a lot of people who are traditional technologists think, well, I can build a skinny core, I can build myself a ledger. It can't be that hard. It is hard.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, it's one of the hardest things. And you very quickly, when you build, fall into a trap of developing technology debt. So, tech debt, because you're building lines of code and you suddenly have to pivot towards a new product opportunity. Going with someone like Mambu, outsourced to someone that lives and breathes that particular technology, gives you the benefit of rapid growth, being able to leverage the wider product engine, and having us manage that on your behalf. It sounds quite simple, right? Because we've disrupted so many sectors as SaaS businesses, accommodation, travel. But with core banking, it's kind of a very strange space to find yourself in, trusting someone else to work with you to do that. Again, cultural. The banks, though, are realizing, okay, we better actually pull our fingers out and own this space once again, or collaborate in this space once again, to remain relevant to the consumer and the customer. They are now king slash queen. Always should have been, but that wasn't the case for a long time.
It kind of always fascinates me when we talk about the open banking, or we have the open
Mm,
banking debate, that really what we're talking about are APIs, which have been around for, for decades, and it's almost as
yeah.
if the banking industry's just discovered them. What do you think is is the catalyst that is going to make open banking, CDR, really become a thing, whereas customers, we're going to start to see some real benefits from that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. If anything, there are a lot of naysayers around open banking, and
I'm
there's
not one of
various
them, by
ways in
the
which
way. So it's
you're one of them. Okay,
no, no,
let me
I'm not.
tread
I'm not one of
carefully.
them. I'm not one of them. I think I'd just like to see more debate and discussion around the customer rather than the regulatory aspects of it.
That's absolutely right. And let me pick up that last bit, regulatory aspects. Many countries are adopting open banking through, freedom, through consumer choice and sentiment, or through cultures where data sharing is not a foreign concept.
Yeah.
Here, though, I think regulatory drive had to happen because otherwise we wouldn't have changed fast enough.
Mm.
And what it did for me, before you've got great user cases, right? And we're beginning to get those, it said to banks, well, hold on, okay, I now need to launch by X date and I need to readily ingest APIs. They said, oh no, my technology stack can't do that. And that's why many banks are beginning to miss these deadlines. So, if anything, it made banks wake up and start developing ways in which they can consume modern technology, middleware, service fabric, greenfield adoption of platforms like Mambu, so that it is an API first situation. So for me, the first win has been these guys have had to wake up to the technology evolution. The second thing is, to your point, we're beginning to see use cases. Now, Mambu did a global survey of consumers around open banking, and the majority had never heard of it. But then a larger majority use mobile apps or tools through which open banking delivers services like finance management and debt collection and the like. So, look, we're beginning to see the use cases, but if anything, it's just sort of woken us up, and that's exciting. And
Mm.
it will come of age. We're not the first in the world to
Yeah.
launch open banking, so there are lessons. But yeah, just not as fast as everyone thought.
Yeah.
That's the key. Yeah.
We keep using the term open banking, but it is actually CDR here in Australia. If I look at it,
Mm,
just the tier one people, business, and portfolio of clients, what's really fascinated me in the last 12 months is how now the kind of the boundaries of what is fintech really seem to have blurred. We've got
mm.
tech platforms as clients, we've got real estate platforms as clients, who all now see their operating model as a more replicant, or more familiar to fintech than it would be a classified or an advertising business or a marketing business. Where do you see a business like Mambu, or where do you see Mambu itself playing in this CDR world of open everything?
Mm, that's a really good question. I think sort of to close the thing on open banking, I think, open banking should be seen and not heard, right? The consumer shouldn't care about open banking per se. The consumer should care about what service they're receiving from a provider. So that's an important point to make. But the changing landscape, you said sort of you have non-fintechs becoming fintechs. I've said already today with you that it's about the customer and the consumer. And the businesses that have consumers, like telcos and various other sectors, are inevitably going to begin to pivot towards embedding fintech or financial services. So there's a buzzword going around since Intersect around embedded finance, and that is the future of banking. I buy that.
Yeah.
And I think your real estate providers, your utilities, your telcos are beginning to realize that they have the biggest asset, which is a customer base. And Mambu power Orange, the Orange Bank in Spain now, for instance, a large telco provider, helping them launch a digital bank. So we're beginning to see that globally of non-banks, even postal services thinking, well, hold on, there's an opportunity here to disenfranchise the sector, and I see that happening. Right?
Yeah.
That's inevitable.
Yeah, and we seen kind of last year, Razer, the gaming company, were going for a digital banking license in Singapore. I know Mambu had the partnership with Razer, and had that gone ahead, I think that would have been another great example of where we're seeing these kind of rather than consumers, I would say communities, right? I see the gaming
That's right.
community is a great example of where we've just seen with Upbank, here in Oz, how they've managed to tap in to that kind of that group and that cohort, and it's then attracted other people, and everything from their branding to the user experience to the advertising that they do. It's kind of amazing to see how we're now seeing these kind of micro communities being catered for with a product that's just exactly right for them.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And if you serve a product within an environment where someone is comfortable, they will consume it.
Mm.
And that's that becoming their expectations. And especially when you speak about digital natives, which gamers are on the whole,
Yeah,
they're living in an entirely different universe. So they're
yeah,
living in a metaverse, right?
yeah,
So if I can open a Fortnite banking account, if my son could, if he was old enough, he
yeah,
would, then you're going to get stickiness and relevance. And that's a key thing. Consumers are no longer tied or shackled. They don't open, a savings account as a child and stay with you until you're
yeah,
super matures. They will download every neobank app and go with the best
yeah,
experience. That's another sort of important point, right? It's just got to pivot fast to where these people
yeah,
are, and it's a very different place to what it was. Geez, even 14 years ago when I
yeah.
got into fintech.
Well, and I think this is a really interesting thing, right? I got my kids who are 10 and almost 9. They keep getting questions of, "Hey, Dad, why can't I transfer my Robux from one account to another? Why can't I transfer them and exchange them for Fortnite dollars or V Bucks or whatever they are?" They got a Spriggy account, a Revolut Kids account. They got rid of their Dolomites account, and I
Yep.
remember them saying to me that and they said, "Hey, we want to get rid of this, Dad. It just doesn't make any sense that once a month I can get money out of my account, and I've got to fill in this form and take
Mm.
it to on a Tuesday once every month." And I think this
It's
is kind of,
outstanding, isn't
yeah, it
it?
is, right. And I mean, this is kind of, we're talking about 7 and 8 year old kids at the time who are making these choices. So
I've just ordered a new debit card, a Spriggy card for my 8-year-old
yeah,
son, so he can tap instead of pay cash.
yeah.
So you're absolutely spot on. It's quite scary though, isn't it?
Well, I think it's scary for banking executives, right? Who are living in these, it feels as if they're living in these kind of ivory towers, and they're so detached from what's actually going on. Or, if they're not detached, it's just that, there doesn't seem to be the will there to really push forward and kind of, as I think you mentioned earlier, be brave enough to actually step into this world. It's not even a new world, right? It's a world that's here. It's kind of, computerization has been a 30-year process.
That's right.
Digitization has been a 30-year process. None of this is new.
Yeah. And you know what? We're working with a lot of the banks, and it's not that they lack the skill set, because
Yeah,
they have
yeah,
incredible talent
yep,
around cloud, around API, but it's the larger picture, the direction of a bank that needs to change. And that's like changing direction of a ship. It takes about 20 nautical miles to actually even just change a gear. So, but there are some banks that you've mentioned earlier that are starting to do that and structuring in a way that is far better performing in terms of making product and business decisions. So I'm bullish that a
mm,
few of these banks will really
yeah,
shine, but it will ultimately be through collaboration with the fintech universe, with the likes of Mambu. That's when they really will pivot towards a
yeah,
place that a consumer will be comfortable with, and they're
yeah,
not right now, right?
yeah. You
That's the thing.
that point about talent though, Kris. Funny story. So, I was approached by one of the big four banks who asked us to work with them to help find the best tech talent out there. And I had to explain to them that actually I headhunt their talent from them, and I couldn't actually work with them because that was the stomping ground.
Oh,
But my point
Dexter.
was, what can I actually possibly do? Because you've already got the best talent. Like, what are you expecting me to do for you? Because you've got them, and I think it's a really it's a really interesting point that they have got the resources, they have got the talent, and yet it's always looking for the thing that they haven't got or perceptively that they haven't got that is then going to be the catalyst for them to make this change. And I think it's such a I think it's such a kind of a stark kind of not warning, but just, hey, you can't wait to have everything kind of ticked and have everything perfect before you then make that step and make that change.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. It's about, our internal theme when we kicked off this year at Mambu after this raise was, let's be bold.
Yeah.
Let's be bold in what we do in market. And I've tried to sort of deliver that to the market as well and encourage them to be as bold. And it's working, I
Yeah.
hope. So,
Yeah.
like I said, I'm bullish, but it takes a while, and that time is coming. I've said that already a few times, but time is now. That's why I took this role. That's why Mambu is shining and growing like it is, because time is everything. And this next 10 years of fintech, I couldn't be more excited
Yeah, me
about.
too. Me too.
Yeah.
Now in the intro, I did mention to our listeners that were recognized as Startup CEO of the Year at the CEO Magazine Awards. I think it was 2019. Um, Mate, you're
Yes.
one of the I think coolest cats I've ever met in the industry, but
Thank you very
but
much.
also a really great leader as well. And you've built a team and a culture at Split. You're building another team and culture at Mambu. How do you go about, first of all, hiring great people and spotting top talent?
Yeah, I think that for me is probably the most important part of my role. Someone said to me, an academic within Mambu last week, he said, "Kris, you're a servant leader," and I haven't come across that, to be honest, before. I now, thanks to Google, understand what it is as a discipline, but I've always been like that. Like,
Yeah,
let other people shine, empower people, and and this is said often, but it couldn't be more true. People can learn about fintech. People can learn a discipline,
yeah,
but you've got to find the right culture, the right person to fit into your culture, whatever that culture might be. So I'm quite choosy. And I really bring them on the dream before we make a decision about hiring, so that when they come on board, they know they're part of this journey and
mm,
understand it for what it is. So a lot of my time is taken up by getting in front of candidates, working with people like you to find the right talent. And it couldn't be more important. So the servant leader, though, it sits comfortably with me.
mm,
I don't want to be the ego. I do have a responsibility to drive a brand and drive a profile, but it's about building something that's so much bigger, and that will only be delivered through a team that is like-minded. I
yeah,
hope that makes sense.
yeah. It does. And you touched there that it's about kind of being transparent with people about what the journey is. How have you kind of found that's then translated into people's performance and their relative success in the role?
I think it's feeling that they're part of something is the most critical thing. They're not here to serve a purpose, be KPI'd on it, and get their wage at the end of the day. You want to be part of the journey, and that's easy to sell as something like Mambu because we're at this hyper growth stage where we're now a double unicorn. Globally, we're now at 650 people. We'll be over 1,000 by the end of this year. Like I said, we've doubled our workforce here in Australia as well. So you haven't got time to sit back and take it all in. I say to new staff, look, I can't tell you Mambu will be what it is today in 6 months because everything changes so fast.
Yeah.
And it's hard to manage that, right? We're now having to behave and grow like a global SaaS business. And that takes change and structure and the change is hard to deal with. So you need someone, Mambu could hire bankers, right? But we do on a part, but we also hire fintech people that really get that momentum and pace of work. So a good balance between the two is serving us well, and would serve others well as well. Domain experts, but brilliant people, tier one people.
Yeah.
There you go. You can have that.
Mate, that's why I called the business. What a tier.
Why not tier two people?
Well, when I launched the business, I was given some advice by my dad, who couldn't understand why I didn't call it Dexter Cousins Recruitment, because the only recruitment firm he was aware of was Michael Page. So you do realize Michael Page wasn't the person.
That is brilliant. I love that.
So you've kind of you mentioned there, Kris, it's kind of pretty easy with Mambu to get people on that journey and attract talent, but you had to do this for split payments as well. It wasn't well known. It was up in Byron Bay. How did you go about, with not having the kind of sizzle to dangle, and you got Byron Bay, which is a great place to live, but there's not a lot of people. Certainly fintech people, it's not renowned as a hotbed of talent. What were the approaches that you had to take there? Because a lot of our listeners are going to be founders who are like, oh, that's easy for Kris to say. He's at Mambu. We're just 5 people in a garage trying to get a name for ourselves.
That is the best question. And at that time in Byron, all we got knocking on our door were Hollywood actors, they just don't get fintech. So we had to turn them away. Sorry, Kris, just stick to what you know. But in seriousness, you're right. Back then, it was the 4 founders, myself coming in, and we were lucky to have stumbled upon something radical, which is modernizing direct entry banking through overlaying APIs and making it perform better, making it more visible. So we had to go and punch above our weight for quite a long time, get in front of the right client base and prospects, and sell them the problem solution that any founder has to develop with a pitch deck. Here's the problem. This is the solution. So we were dogged in our vocalness around DE being ripe for being fixed or replaced and we were lucky enough through that doggedness to get the ears of some of the banks, NPP. We found ourselves at the big end of town presenting infrastructural opportunities, and yet we were these 5 guys from Byron. So pretty hard to stay true to that belief. But we ended up in New York by invitation because what we developed was so radical. So you have to believe in yourself. You have to be dogged. I know this is a bit cliche, but it's cliche for a reason.
Yeah.
It works. Yeah. So you have to be bold. You have to back yourself. And I think, again, if we're picking a common theme through this interview, is that boldness. Founders, he or she have to be the most courageous in the room. Thankfully, though, fintech ecosystem is changing here. There's bigger deal sizes. There's a bigger capital investment environment and appetite. So I've seen since Split was launched a huge change in us becoming a powerhouse country when you compare us globally to your traditional centers of excellence for fintech.
You've also got a fairly unique role in that you're a country manager for an overseas fintech. It's something that we do a lot of. It requires a really unique person, blue-eyed unicorns, we call them, to our clients. What would you say for anybody out there who's kind of thinking about taking that step or has made that step? What advice could you share with people as to how to be successful in this type of role?
Yeah, look, I'll be really honest about this. So, I was CEO of Split Payments. So, a massive leadership role when the decision stops with me. But coming into a much bigger company had huge benefits. Like I said, I was romanced by it. But I'm now part of a much bigger beast, right? And we have leadership above leadership above leadership. So you do well to learn how to fit into that culture and that structure. And that for me was a challenge in the beginning, but then when you learn how to act as a team, whether you're a leader or part of a team, you can apply that to any scale or size of business. And that's exactly what we do. We realize we're autonomous in Australia and New Zealand. Any GM that you'd put in place here, Dexter, they have to have a degree of autonomy and confidence in leadership. But you also have to go on the ride of this much bigger at scale thing. And, I don't have the ear of the entire Mambu universe. And that's something you need to get used to. So that's probably, I hope that's inspirational, but it's also something, let's be prepared.
Yeah.
But there's huge opportunity out there, and everyone has to, I think, experience that to become a really good founder too, by the way.
Um, Now we talked a little bit about how Australia is really forging ahead in fintech. Mambu released a piece of I think research recently where, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Australia was number 6 in the world as a fintech hub, according to some of the metrics that this research was measuring countries and cities on. Is that right?
How exciting is that? It's true. We've risen up the ranks, and we're now 6 globally, but 2 in APAC, second only to Singapore. So that says a lot about the success of the region, and like I said, the appetite. So these deals that are going ahead, there was a cloud guru, I think it is, that sold for 2 billion
Yeah.
as an acquisition. These deal sizes were unheard of here. We kind of felt like we were this island on the far side of the world with no impact, but it couldn't be further from the truth. There's so many success stories. So that's now reflected. And also, we're a pretty bloody good place to live, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's got to be attractive. But whilst that sale was with a large audience in America, there's just a lot of momentum and growth opportunity, even within the domestic markets here. In New Zealand, let's not forget, across the ditch, some of the behaviors and payments and user behaviors and technology are indexing through the roof. So really interesting audience in this market, and that helps.
Yeah, yeah. So, Kris, we're kind of coming to a wrap up, but what can we expect from Mambu over this next 12 months?
Seismic shift and growth. I couldn't be prouder of the deal flow we're working through right now. And that's very rewarding to be able to, not just shout from the rooftops, but deliver. And that's what's going to happen over the next 6 to 12. Like I said, we're employing, my taking the role in Australia shows how committed Mambu are to those core markets. And this is one of the most important. So just a lot of noise. I think also as a cultural bastion. We're right now, Dexter, in the middle of the European summer, where every employee at Mambu has a 4-day work week. So every week, our staff are encouraged to take a day off. You don't get a pay cut for that. It's just about rewarding our staff. And so I think hopefully we'll also lead the way with how big fintech should behave and act culturally. I'm
Yeah.
as excited about that as I am about client wins.
Mm,
So it's celebrating the fintech environment, and we very much sit amongst fintechs. Yeah,
yeah,
we're core banking, but I believe we are, in the center of this ecosystem that will really
mm,
serve all fintechs in
yeah.
Australia very well.
You mentioned there that you are growing and hiring. Are there any types of people in particular that, if they're listening, should potentially get in touch with?
Tier one people, I'd say we're looking to launch an advisory part of the business, or we are. So people that have worked in traditional consulting firms and want to sort of get to the coal face of delivering that for smaller clients and large clients alike, we'd love to hear from them. We need the engineering talent, as does everyone else, and we're looking for that constantly in market. And for me, the last one, Dexter, is customer success. Managing our customers moving forward, really understanding them. We need people that are the best at relationships.
Yeah,
So that can be a very wide talent pool.
yeah.
So I'd love to hear from as many people who are inspired by this interview.
Cool. And you do a fair bit on the speaking circuit, Kris. Where we're going to see you next?
It depends. I'm waiting for the next numbers announcements, right?
Yeah.
Around COVID. But look, we also focus on credit unions and mutuals. I highly covet them because there's so much happening in that realm. We're actually hosting our own event late August in Adelaide at Adelaide Zoo,
Wow.
called the Future Forum. And that's to get that sector, the tier 2 banking sector, together to talk about the next 10 years of technology for core banking. So it's at the zoo. Mambu is actually another word in a different language for bamboo. We're actually hosting the event in a panda enclosure. The only risk is that's breeding time for pandas, so enter at your own risk. But would love to get people to that event.
You're selling it, Kris. You're selling it.
I try.
Well, Kris, it's been great to have you on the show. Always a pleasure to chat. Where can people find out more? Where can people find out more about Mambu?
Oh, the obvious first point would be Mambu, mambu.com. That's where you can find the events that I just spoke about and case studies and inspiration about what we do. But look, I love reaching out. Like you said, I love speaking. I love sharing thoughts and evangelizing. So please do connect personally via LinkedIn. And let's establish a conversation from there. But we have a lot of information and inspiration at the website. So, I enjoyed learning about core banking through there. So I encourage you all to do that too.
Awesome. Kris, great to have you on the show, and good luck with everything in this, what sounds like it's going to be a stellar 12 months.
Thank you, my friend. I really appreciate it. A pleasure talking.
And you can connect with me, Dexter Cousins, on LinkedIn and Twitter. For early access to new shows, subscribe to our newsletter by visiting the Fintech Chatter page on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please consider leaving us a review. It really helps me bring on great guests like Kris and helps more Fintech fans like you discover the show. Fintech Chatter is presented by Tier 1 People, leaders in Fintech executive search. We'll help you launch, scale, and innovate by delivering world-class talent. And you can find out more at tier1people.com. Until the next episode, stay safe